Good afternoon and welcome to the show, Lifelong Learners. And I'm your talk show host, Terrence Perry. And you may remember the show being Rebels with a Purpose, but I've since then changed that name and title to Lifelong Learners. One of the reasons I did that was because I'm rebranding the whole concept of my organization to Lifelong Learners. There'll be Lifelong Learners retreats, Lifelong Learners self-help books, Lifelong Learners talk show. With me today, I have a special guest. That's Michael Goulding. He's a therapist with Carolina Partners, and I'll be talking with him today about lifelong learning and also about mental health and therapy and just a lot of the things that he's involved in. Um, so if you want to call into the show today, you can reach us at 919-518-9773. And we're going to get started as soon as I, first of all, introduce my producer, Amnon.
Hello, Terrence. How are you?
I'm good, man. Any trending topics been coming your way over the past few days?
I need to show you some show ratings that people sent in that I forgot to give you, so I'll give it to you later. It's all good.
All good. All right. Sounds great. So with no further ado, I want to introduce my guest today, Michael Goulding. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Terrence.
All right. Michael, I just want to kind of get you to let the audience know who you are and what Carolina Partners Mental Health is all about.
Carolina Partners in Mental Health Care is the largest outpatient mental health care organization in the state of North Carolina. So we have offices all over the state, including Asheville, recently Charlotte, all around the RTP area. And we go out and we have offices in all these different locations, and we have med services so people can get medications. And then there are people like myself who do the talk therapy aspect of that.
So let me ask you this, Michael. How did you become a managing partner with Carolina Partners? How does that process work?
Well, I had a good friend refer me to this organization, and I spoke with them, and I liked their ideals. They have a really good mindset around mental health care and getting it out to the community, making sure people can have the opportunity to have something close to them. And then through working there and through the absence of other people working there and leaving, I took the reins and said, we need to keep working at this and we need to have someone in charge here. And as a result of that, I was promoted to the position of managing partner.
Right. So as managing partner, you say you're a therapist, so you do a lot of the, I guess, talking therapy is what they call it. You're talking to the clients, but give me an idea of what a therapy session sort of sound like. What does that sound like?
Well, basically, you start off with a situation where you do an assessment. And when you do an assessment, you want to find out what's going on first before you take it in the direction you need to go, right? You need to know where you're going before you go there. So after that assessment, then it's about meeting the person's emotional needs. And people come in, and that's what their agenda is. They want their emotional needs met. And usually they're coming in because they're struggling with an individual in their life. Usually it's the healthier person, ironically, that comes to the session, and not the person who you would think in the old days when there's all the stigma of people going to a therapist that there was something really wrong with them. A lot of times, ironically, it is the healthiest person who's struggling with someone in their life. And so I give them coping skills that they can use. A lot of people come in with traumas, and those traumas block their emotional fulfillment. And how that works is kind of interesting. People have different traumas in their life. And if you think of a pipeline, and energy flows through that pipeline, and the pipeline is clear, it's open, life is good, they're happy, they're relaxed, they're fulfilled. Any way that you define your good stuff is what they're experiencing when that pipeline is open. But when people begin to experience traumas, when they've had bad things happen to them, and when I say trauma, I mean something horrific that has happened, a time where they felt extremely helpless or extremely frightened, or they felt their life was in danger. These are the types of things that will serve as like forming layers in this pipeline. And the pipeline gets so many layers that it begins to close up to a small opening. And it can have a couple of effects. And one of the effects is if you've ever put your thumb over a garden hose. Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's all this pressure that builds up, and people get all this anxiety. And it's like they have all these things that they need to do. They can't focus on any of them because they're so stressed out, and they're going in a million different directions, and their mind is racing, and they can't focus. That is one effect of that. The other, and we call that anxiety.
Okay.
Now, the other effect is if you're trying to pour water and there's only this tiny opening in that pipeline, you get this dribbling out of energy, and people are like, ugh. They're sluggish, they're slow, they see everything as difficult, and they feel like they're walking through mud, and they're weighted down, and oh, I have all this I have to write, oh, I have to go up all those stairs. So these are the effects that can happen. So what happens in a session is people tell me what those blockages are, and what I do is I come in and I bore those out through different processes.
Oh man, that sounds a bit more intense and in depth. Now, the reason I say that is because as a life coach myself, and you're a therapist.
I'm also a life coach as
and
well.
Life coach.
Yeah.
So let's try to get the audience to understand the difference in therapy and life coaching, because I think a lot of people when they come to me for life coaching, they want therapy, and sometimes I may refer them to a therapist because I don't think they're ready. I mean, that they're ready for life coaching. So, can you explain a little bit about how life coaching is different from from the therapy process, but at the same time, how the two can come together to work with one client?
Sure. That's a great question, and one I get often. So when someone comes to counseling, they're dealing with a mental health diagnosis, which is very legitimate and can be a medical diagnosis. It comes from what we call the DSM-5 or the ICD-10, which is what medical doctors use to diagnose the different symptoms that people have. So when people come in with such disorders, I help them through those disorders. I help them work through that. Now, the difference with life coaching has a different approach. Life coaching is more of the type of person, I'm doing fine, I'm doing great, things are okay, but I want to go from good to great. I'm not satisfied where I am in life, and I need some coping skills to move from that good to great type of situation. And there's a process in life coaching of people, defining what people's needs are, what their goals are, and where they want to move forward in life. And what you do with that is you help them define those goals. You help them bring in resources to help them with those goals, and help them join with other people that can help them meet their goals. Whereas opposed to counseling, we may use all of those techniques as well, but there's also that mental health diagnosis where we can help people get through that medical issue.
So, and Shirley in the chat is saying, in today's economic and political climate, so many people need this type of therapy.
Absolutely. One of the things we're not taught in school that is probably one of the most important life skills in life is getting our emotional needs met and learning those coping skills to get our emotional needs met. And we're not seeing healthy ways to do that on TV. We're not learning that in schools as much as we need to be. And, you know, we used to get that in our families and through the guidance of our extended families and the small towns that many of us grew up in. That's being lost. So I agree with that statement.
And also, anybody that want to call into the show, do call in at 919-518-9773. And if you have any questions or concerns, ask Michael, or you can ask myself or Amnon, and hopefully we can answer those questions. We have a caller. Caller, this is Lifelong Learners, Terrence Perry. Go ahead.
Hi, Terrence. This is Shirley. Sorry I missed you for a couple of weeks, but this is so interesting. And like I said, it's something that is very, very needed. There's so many people impacted today by anxious situations. I mean, we live in a very, very anxious world with just so much happening. So I would like to applaud your guest for what he's doing, and I would like to applaud you for opening up your platform to a much broader audience of people. So congratulations to the both of you.
Cheryl, I appreciate that, and I'm always glad to have you call in or listen to the show. I always enjoy the questions or the comments that you have and that you make. So continue to do that, and I'm also excited about the work that you're doing as an educator, traveling across the country and sharing your message as well. Again, we have Michael Goulding on the show, and he's a therapist in the Wake County area. He's with Carolina Partners, and he do have a broad knowledge of therapy and of coaching and of mental health. So Michael, in that vein, can you kind of tell us how you got involved in mental health? What kind of brought you to that purpose or that mission in your life to where you knew you wanted to be involved in mental health?
Great question. And the way I came about that is, being a young man, I actually started off in communication media. I wanted to get the messages out to people, and I started noticing things that people often knew the solutions to problems that we all know about in this world, and it's not a lack of knowledge that's getting in the way of the solutions to this world, but more of the mental health issues, more of the anxieties that people have, or people choosing very unhealthy coping mechanisms through revenge or anger, trying to get back at other people. And I thought, well, if I could learn a skill that could help people get their emotional needs met in a much more healthy way, wouldn't that be something that could make the world a better place? And also, what was happening with me is I was able to help people and knew I kind of had a knack for that. Emotionally, I began to feel really good every time I started helping someone. And I would see that other people were feeling good, and I wanted this to continue forth. And there's a spiritual component to this as well, where when I do help people, I see them feeling better. I begin to feel better. The room that I'm sitting in with these people feels better. And in my belief system, I feel that the whole world benefits and begins to feel a little bit better.
So Michael, so let me ask you, when you speak about spirituality in mental health or just in humanity in general, just kind of talk to me a little bit about how you take spirituality, how you take spirituality and use it to, I guess, to do the things that you do, but also how does that help you going forward with the things that you want to do in life with with spirituality? Let's say, for instance, if you didn't have spirituality in your life, where would you be and what would you be doing? And having spirituality in your life, what's the difference, Mike?
Well, I probably would have chosen something that would have made me more money initially in my career instead of choosing social work. But if I didn't have the spirituality component to that, I'm not sure, because spirituality has been such a big part of my life throughout my life. Hard to say where I would have gone without that. But how do I use that in my life is a great question, because I think, and what I've observed and working with people for over 25 years now, what I've seen is that the way people think about their spirituality is a big part of the attitude they have toward life in general. You know, if people feel that there's something divine out there, if they feel that there's something good to work for, then they're going to have a very different perspective than someone who just thinks, you know, after they die, it's just over. And again, I don't impose a belief system on a person. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't know what happens. I have my faith and my beliefs in what happens, but it is not up to me, because of my own trials and the thoughts I've had throughout this process, that doesn't really work with people. But if I know where a person's coming from and they are struggling, and I can align them with the values that they have, oftentimes those values are very much in line with the mental health principles that I learned that are research-based and scientific.
So,
Michael,
go ahead, Shirley.
I want to ask him a question, because I'm looking at, and I understand, I have a little bit of background in psychology. Well, I have a degree in psychology. And my mother drank herself to death. My brothers, it was 12 of us. There's one left. They all drank themselves to death. Now, what I want to know, addiction is a powerful, powerful drive. How does your therapy, once a person is addicted, once that person has the type of lifestyle and anxiety that's destroying them, how can you bring them back?
Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge their free will. And if they're not willing to make that change, they will not change. They will, as you know firsthand, you know, people will find loopholes. They will find sneaky ways to get around things. You cannot make a person change. But to fully address your question, if somebody does want to make that change, what do you do from there? And what it is, it goes back to meeting a person's emotional needs. And what oftentimes people have done is they've chosen a very poor coping skill, such as drinking or some other addiction, you know, and they go with that as a means and a hope to at least somewhat meet their emotional needs, or at least stop the pain that they're experiencing. Now, what I do is I address the pain, first of all, because many people have had traumas they've experienced, and I process that at the deepest emotional levels. I don't just have them talking about what happened, I have them talk about the emotions that go with that. And that can create a very deep healing that happens with that. Now, there's more to it than just going into the past. We also need to move forward. We need to and you know, we have the psychological component where we go into the past and we heal the medical diagnosis, but then we have the coaching component of it, and we have to give positive coping skills that actually work, research-based coping skills that have been demonstrated to work with other people. And we do that, you know, by teaching them healthy ways to communicate to others, asking for what they need directly versus being passive aggressive about it, or trying to be evasive about it by avoiding the uncomfortableness because they have a lack of skills, so they drink instead of using skills to get through a situation. Also, they can be as skilled and they can heal their past, but if they immerse themselves in the wrong kind of system, then they will continue to be drawn into that system and dragged down to the level of that system. So if they're hanging out with their drinking buddies or people who use drugs, and that, it's much more tempting, much more likely that they're going to be drawn into that habit again because they're with that. So we teach people how to get into new organizations, new systems, new sets of friends that are going to be more supportive of the goals that they truly want in life, that are closer to their spirituality.
Shirley,
How do you, and I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but how do you, as a therapist, overcome poverty in situations like that? I mean, it's almost like it is overwhelming. It's so heavy that it's taking up everything. So how in the world do you, as a therapist or a nation of therapists, overcome this?
Well, that is a big question that could have its own show, I'm sure.
Sure.
I mean, we're looking at 400 people who have half the nation's wealth, and it seems to be heading more and more in that direction, where a few people are having more and more wealth. Let me do my best to address that with the little bit of time that we have and what I can do as a therapist. So one thing I talk about with my clients is I have them, and you can't see in this camera here, but if you were to hold your arms up like this straight out and you were to twist at the waist, you form a circle with your arms. Are you visualizing this?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I'm with you.
Okay. So an important lesson I start every client off with when I start them off in therapy or coaching is I say, you cannot change what's outside of that circle.
Okay.
Okay. So at least initially, and let me kind of talk this through a little bit. You have to focus on what's inside the circle. You have to manage that space inside the circle. And let me talk a little bit more about that as well. I grew up in a small town. People talked about each other. They gossiped. And people complained about what people wore, how they did things. But very little bit of those things had to do with their circle. Even today, people talk about celebrities and the crazy things that celebrities say or do. And, at the end of the day, what a celebrity does really doesn't impact my circle. So what do? I focus on what's inside the circle. I work on my goals. I work on the things that I want to do in my life to move my life forward. And the irony of that is the more you do that, the more you focus on that circle, the more impact you have on the people around you. So if there's any advice on how to solve the big world's problems, poverty, addiction, sexual abuse, hunger, all of those things, environmental issues, those types of things, it all has to start within, and then joining with groups and getting a critical mass to resolve those issues.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Shirley, we appreciate that. We appreciate the questions and just the in-depthness that you bring to the questions that you ask. But also, Michael, let me just back up a little bit with what the way you addressed it. You were sort of talking about as a therapist, you deal with I'll say the hole in a person's soul. Mm-hmm. Is if there's a trauma, if there's a wound, then there's a hole in the soul. So you go to the hole in the soul, and that's where you start to deal with the person that wounded place, whether it was some childhood trauma or it may have happened at later in life, adolescence or so forth. But that wound in that soul caused the trauma in that person's life because that person tried to cover up, or they use addictions to cover up that trauma because they don't want to feel it. They don't want to feel the pain, and they don't want to relive it. But in essence, that's what they're doing when they try to cover it up with alcohol or drugs or any addiction that they take. It could be a lifestyle addiction.
Yes.
Or it could be any type of addiction. Addiction is addiction. It just what your addiction of choice is. But I think when you talk about therapy, you peel those layers back, and you peel those layers all the way back until you get to that core of that person's soul, and then I guess you peel it back, and then you build it back up. I guess it's kind of like the phoenix rising. You tear it all the way down to the ashes. It crashes and burns, and then it has an ability to build itself back up and relive itself all over again, transform. So I think with the therapy, it helps a person to transform their life once they deal with the underlying wound, or the underlying trauma, or the underlying brokenness that they've experienced. Is that making sense to what you do in terms of therapy? I know outside of, the coaching is, we take a person from where they are to where they're trying to get to in terms of moving forward. We only talk about the past when we're trying to get them to see a certain thing that's going to help them to move forward. But as a coach, we don't go so deep into the woundedness. We go more into the things that they want to do to better themselves. But they're not going to reach those things if they don't deal with that woundedness. They may reach it, but they won't maintain it, I'd say. It's not that they can't or they won't enjoy it, because their woundedness is still there. And whether they reach their goal on one end, but they're still dealing with that addiction, then they're still not whole. And I think with the therapy piece, you have to make them whole.
Well said. Well said. And right, what I do is I do work with the holes, or I work the way I prefer to look at it is the blockages in that pipeline. Because when there are blockages in that pipeline, that interferes with the flow of what I believe is to be divine energy. But if the person's an atheist, it can be happiness, peacefulness, self-actualization. So when those layers disappear, it's filled with something good, whether you call it, happiness or peace or Holy Spirit or Iman in Islam, or Ruah and Holy Spirit, however you define it, Ki, Chi, Prana, there's all the world's religions have some sort of discussion on this energy, the Force for all you Star Wars fans out there, whatever you want to call it. But yes, as you get rid of these poor coping skills, if you get rid of these blockages, these traumas, these issues that get in the way, it does fill with something more positive. And I also wanted to address something else that was very interesting that you brought up. A lot of people say, well, I don't use drugs, I don't drink, I don't have addictions. Okay, well, there's all kinds of addictions. There's addictions to porn, there's addictions to gaming, there's addictions to taking risks and shopping and things like that. And you still might say, well, I don't do any of those. Well, some people thrive on drama, and they purposely wait till the last minute to do things, and they get excited, and they like that sense of the adrenaline rush. Or some people have control issues. They like to be in control, and there's an addiction to that. So it can come across in different ways. And people might say, what's wrong with that? If it's not damaging to the body or something like that. But those are all layers that get in the way, that substitute moving toward our goals and moving to where we really want to be.
Amnon, you have a question?
No, I don't, but I just wanted to tell Shirley, she's online.
Okay.
And she's typing in the chat. I want her to make the comments on the air, so I don't have to read them, Shirley.
Shirley, go
hear me?
ahead. Yeah, we hear you, Shirley.
I I'm just writing down stuff as he's saying it because that's what I do anyway. But it's just so what he's saying is awesome. What the both of you are saying are awesome. I know we all want people to realize the importance of mental health because of the impact that it has on one's physical health. So it's just stuff like that I'm looking at. I also love the fact of the hole in the soul concept, because there's so many of us with holes in our souls. And if you can reach there, if you can finally get there, it's a deep, deep hole. And to get there is the journey, and to come back and to make, to bring a healthy situation out of that. So I'm listening. I'm just, I type anyway, but I'm listening.
Well, since we got you on the air today, you don't have to type it in. You can talk it out. And Mike is a therapist, so he can answer to that talk as you talk it out.
See, Michael, I used to be crazy. I came from a crazy family. But it was through taking a course, getting my degree in psychology to understand what crazy really was. And then after I did, I reached down into my soul so I can really relate to what you're speaking on. I had to go deep to find me, to find those coping mechanisms that would keep me above all of the fray that was going on in my family. So I'm really listening to what you have to say, because it's been years for me. But it's so important that people get this, because too many people are running to the doctor for physical ailments, but they won't go for mental reasons, for those emotional reasons. So I applaud you again. I applaud you.
And you bring up a great point with that, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is something I like to convey to as many people as possible. If somebody has seizures and they go to the doctor for those seizures and they are prescribed medication, which I do not do, I do talk therapy, they have no qualms about taking medication for that. But what a lot of people just simply don't understand is that things like depression and anxiety, they can be related to poor coping skills, like running east to see a sunset, since the sun sets in the west, that's a poor coping skill, and that's going to create anxiety. But there can also be a very physiological component to that.
Exactly.
Very much like epilepsy or diabetes or something like that. And what happens is people, without any other events happening in their life, a cloud comes in, a storm comes in. I call it the emotional cloud. The storm just kind of seeps in, and they feel gray, and they feel down, they feel depressed, they're sad. And some people say, well, I don't cry, I'm not depressed, I'm not suicidal. Some people are depressed, and they're angry, and they're irritable, and they feel guilty a lot of the times, or they feel like they're a burden to everybody around them, and that they feel like they shouldn't be around people because they don't want to burden them and cause harm or inconvenience them. These are all these hidden signs of depression. It can be a very biological thing, and you can go to your primary care physician and have that conversation with them, and it might be something that you could really benefit from by going to a talk therapist. And we try to always start with what we call the least invasive intervention. In other words, we start with talk therapy first, and then we look at medication second, and then we look at other things afterward. So we start with this very slowly, very gradually, and with your permission. What I tell my clients is I don't do boot camp therapy. I don't say, you need to push through this. Everybody has a brake pedal. There's safety here. And you have all kinds of options with that, and you can go at your own pace.
Michael, let me ask you also, I want to back up a little more to when we were talking about humanity and what's going on out there today with Right now, there's a lot of in the world. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the political arena, just in the world in general. There's a lot of fear that's being promoted out there. Now, from a therapist standpoint, how does that fear feed itself, and how can we turn that around, turn that fear into love, and just turn this whole course of action around that we're seeing out in the world today?
Well, great question. And again, it goes back to addiction and those types of things. There's a lot of drama in the news, and some people are very good at getting this drama going, getting excitement going, getting people to read headlines and watch the news and things like that. And the issue with that is that drama and that excitement and that anxiety, it is disempowering. I'll say that again. It is disempowering. It takes power away from you when you get caught up in that, when you choose to get caught up in that, when you start looking beyond that circle of space within your arm's reach. There is that disempowerment that can happen, and it's a very polarizing climate, a word I like to use a lot because I do a lot of conflict resolution, and polarity is one of the things that causes conflicts, creating a bad atmosphere, by trying to emotionally charge the system with throwing out insults and those types of things. Again, it's very exciting. John F. Kennedy talked about how peace was not as exciting as war, and it wasn't as dramatic as war, but it did have a lasting type of benefit to it, and that people could be who they wanted to be and pursue their goals. So to answer your question in terms of the solution to that, focusing on your space, focusing on what you want to do that is productive, getting on Facebook and ranting about the client you don't like or promoting the client you do like. I don't think anyone in history has ever gone onto Facebook and said, this person made a really good point that has totally caused me to change and shift my way of thinking. So, talking about things and which is different than going out and campaigning for someone that you support, which is different than turning away from this, not getting involved, which is different than working on your personal projects that actually do cause change in the world. Those are the things that people who are trying to disempower you are afraid of doing, They're afraid of you taking positive steps to actually getting things done. So they use things like excitement, polarizing by charging things with emotional energy to get you off course with that. And I'm not trying to go like crazy conspiracy theory with this, but I'm just talking in general that this is a great way for people to manipulate you and get you off course. So a good technique for that, I call it the mirror technique. So if you imagine the surface of water like a pond or something like that, if that pond has an agitated surface, like if you have agitated emotion going on, agitated thoughts going on, your thoughts are toward getting back at the other person and trying to cause harm in that, then there's a problem with that and a disadvantage that you have. But say you get grounded, you get centered, you become moderate in your way of thinking, and that surface of water becomes flat. Now, there are a few advantages with this. One is, and this comes from a martial arts technique. I have a martial arts background. I've been doing martial arts since the age of 5.
Wow.
Thank you. And one of the principles of martial arts is peace. Ironically, it is peace. It's staying peaceful in some of the most difficult situations that, the most challenging situations to be peaceful in. So when you have that flat surface of water, before an attack happens, there's a ripple on the water. And that ripple is a signal to you that something's about to happen, and you can measure what's going to happen. Now, if you're agitated, you can't detect those kinds of things. You don't have that sensitivity or an awareness. But when you're calm, you do. So it's important to get calm, do the deep breathing, shift your focus away from harming another person. The other thing is just reporting things very factually. You know, there are a number of conflicts I've had in my life, and I was just calm, and I just calmly stated what was going on. And here's the part I think you're really going to like. That flat surface, you can see on a surface of a pond, you can see the other side perfectly, clearly. And, you know, if I talk calmly with another person, all they can see is themselves, and they're forced to look at themselves. If I do no wrong in my counter response to a person, they have nothing to hold on me, and they can only see themselves. Let me give you a quick example. You're in a meeting, somebody comes into a room, they start screaming at you, they start pointing at you, they start insulting you, they start saying mean things. You could choose to stand up for yourself and literally stand up and point back and yell. And now there's two people yelling and pointing. And a boss walks in and they see two people yelling and pointing. Now, I want you to think about this. Let's just say you sit there calmly, not meekly, not sitting back, but proudly being calm. We're mirrors, we're not sponges. And we're gonna present a strong image, but we're not going to counterattack, at least not with direct responses. Maybe something like you need to lower your voice. Basically, you tell the person what you want from them. You need to lower your voice, you need to sit down, stop pointing at me, and you say it in a calm voice. Now, all of a sudden, there's only one person yelling, and everybody in the room just sees one person yelling. And how does that look? You know, which one do you think you have a little bit more of an advantage with? You know, where you're yelling or where you're calm and you're just calmly requesting that the person behave appropriately?
Michael, let me ask you this, because what you just stated, it relates to a book that you've written, and I do want you to mention the book that you've written and also what that book kind of entails. And I think you kind of just spoke to that, but I want you to mention the book because, and also how to get that book, because a lot of what you just said today, I think it speaks to what you have in the book. So can you just let people know that you do have that book?
Sure. It's called Protecting Your Inner Peace, and it uses a martial arts metaphor. First of all, you can get this on Amazon, so it's available there. And it uses a martial arts metaphor and a specific martial art, the martial art of Aikido. Aikido is called the art of peace, and it's called the art of peace because you can defend yourself without having to harm your opponent in the process. So what I do is I don't expect people who get this to know what Aikido is. So if you don't know, so don't worry about that. But what I am going to teach you how to do in this book is apply those Aikido principles of being peaceful and not causing harm to the opponent and still defending yourself, but doing it verbally. And there's some very important techniques that I use in that book to show you how to do that successfully, that are research-based techniques that are based in science, based in research, but also are timeless principles that you see in a lot of religions and philosophies that have been around for a long time.
Okay. Michael, Shirley, do you have another question?
I just wanted to ask him, thank you. I just wanted to ask him about writing, because writing has been therapy for me. I had a diary when I started. I think I was 11 years old when I got my diary. And I'm telling you, I started the diary, it was like color purple. Dear God, this and this. And when I wanted to curse my mother out, I went right to that diary. That, you know what. I mean, my aunt, the one who raised me. But the writing has been tremendous for me. Do you ever use writing as a part of your therapy?
I do, because we have thousands, tens of thousands of thoughts that swirl through our brains in a day. The interesting thing is most of those thoughts are repeated. And a lot of times when we take those thoughts and we put them down on paper, our brain says, okay, I don't have to keep recycling those thoughts over and over. And it clears our heads and it opens up the pipeline even more. So journaling is a very effective therapy tool to help people clear their minds and clear and get more energy back in their life again.
Okay. So, Michael, at this point, Shirley, I appreciate the questions that you had today and also the concerns. And I always enjoy your calls, so continue to keep on calling. And Michael, I want to just thank you for coming on the show today and being able to share a bit more about what therapy and mental health is all about, and actually how that relates to humanity and what's going on in the world today, how the role that therapists play in the bigger scheme of things. So I appreciate that. We appreciate you you writing the book, and hopefully people get the book and get more understanding of just how to find and create peace instead of war and anxiety and fear, but to find peace. And like you said, it may not be as dramatic, but it's a calming effect that we may need right now. Everything don't have to be dramatic all the time.
Right.
And I think right now in society it's too dramatic, overly dramatic. So I think the book that you have, that relates to peace and just what you bring to that equation, keto techniques and therapy and coaching, I think the combination of all of those can be impactful to humanity. So and I'm sure that speaks to your mission as well as your purpose that you bring here on Earth today. So again, I appreciate you being here, being on the planet with us, and continue to do what you're doing. Again, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Terrence. Thank you so much.
Okay. Now,
Awesome show.
all right. So now I'm going to bring my next guest on, and her name is Barbara Johnson. And Barbara is the CEO of BJ and Associates. BJ and Associates is a life coaching service, training service. But I'm gonna let Barbara expand on that a little bit more and just kind of tell you what she does as CEO of BJ and Associates. Barbara, how you doing this evening?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Okay. I want you to focus on the audience right here and just speak to the audience about who BJ and Associates are as it relates to your company and what you do.
Okay. All right. Again, my name is Barbara Elleen Johnson, and the name of my company is BEJ and Associates. And what it is I refer to it as a transformational coaching, life coaching, and business consulting company. And that gives me the opportunity to pull in all the things that are near and dear to me. I am a life coach, a master life coach, and I also have a team of associates, and of course Terrence Perry is one, and Michael that you just heard is another one. And what we do, my vision for this company, and so far we've been adhering to that, is to come up with really creative ways of addressing some of the things that people struggle with. I have, like I said, you've heard Michael, so you know, and you know Terrence. These are people who think out of the box, who are innovative and creative. We have, this team will put together a training, a seminar, an event that's going to address an issue for an organization, for instance. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because there are so many of these amazing agencies that are doing good work, especially with the low-income population or the special populations like people in early recovery and things like that. But they have been closing their doors for one reason or another. And I think it's because they haven't had a team like ours to come in and help them identify what those problems are and find solutions for them before it gets to the point where they can't go any further. But I'm excited to have a few minutes on the program just to tell you that if you liked what you heard when Michael was talking, you can hear a lot more from him. Our agency, my company, we are sponsoring our own event this time. Usually we go in and respond to the needs of others and do things according to, how they want us to do it. This is our first time out. We're going to sponsor our own event, and it's called Fall Forward. And if you want more information, because I've got limited time here, go to the website. It's bej-associates.com. So that's really easy to remember, bej-associates.com. And there's, on the very first page, there's a link to this, to an opportunity to register for this event. Like I said, it's called Fall Forward, and I just, I thought that was relevant because what we're going for is an opportunity to give people an opportunity to change direction. If you're not satisfied, if you're stressed out, if you're not happy with your job, if you have some, if you feel overwhelmed, problems sleeping, things like that, those are common symptoms of stress. What we are going to do is to offer some underlying causes for that stress, a way to address the cause of the stress. And ideally, we want this to happen for you, before you start another new year of the same old, same old. This is a chance to just redirect and that. And Michael, of course, he's going to be first on the agenda, and he is going to do a presentation on dealing with difficult people. His wife, Cindy, I don't know if he's talked about her at all. I'd be surprised if he didn't. She's amazing. They're the dynamic duo.
Bubba, let me interject before you go any further. Just let them know that what we're talking about is a workshop for organizations. We're talking about workforce training. So the workshop that you're doing, that we'll be hosting, is for it's for us going into to jobs, to organizations, to talk to their employees. So can you take it from that standpoint?
Well, I mean, that's what we can do. This event is open to anybody who feels compelled to take a look at some different options. Okay. We have Sterling Fulton, who has her own totally different thing, but she's also an associate, and she's going to be introducing her book, The Brain Trust Planner. And what she'll do is, before you leave, you'll have a vision of what your life purpose is, and you'll have some goals in place that's going to get you on the course, so that when 2017 comes around, you'll be going for the life that you really want to live. So that's what this event is all about. And I'd be remiss not to mention that we'll have a wonderful catered lunch, and the Brain Trust Planner, which is about a $39 value, will be a part of the what you'll get if you participate. And during our lunch, we have two very renowned speakers, and we're going to have Terrence Perry on our agenda for our luncheon speaker, and another member of our team. His name is Dana Gower, and he's written a book on careering. And what these two guys will do is give you some pointers on how to engage the population that you're working with. And you could probably expound on that more, but so I'm excited about it. Just want you to go to that website, take a look. You heard Michael, I mean, and you just heard, the tip of the iceberg. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge, a very compassionate trainer. He and his wife together, anybody we do training for, they love these two people. His wife will be a part of this too, and she will be doing some wellness exercises and things like that. We'll have those interspersed throughout. So we'll deal with the symptoms of stress and discontent and those kinds of things, but mainly we want to offer the opportunity to dig deeper. And that's something you'll have to come and to the workshop and find out about, because we have some ideas, and I think some have been mentioned here. We have a lot of walking wounded in this world, and we're here to try to, to help them.
So let me ask you too, Bobby, just before we close out, if other people want to utilize your company, BJ and Associates, to do workshops for their organizations, how can they get in touch with you, and how do they know that they can use your service to provide those type of workshops? What do they have to do to let you know that they want your service?
Okay. Well, like I said, you can go to bej-associates.com. On our website, there's a list we have over 50 workshops that have been tried and tested and are effective. And you can look at that list. But like I said, we are innovative, out-of-the-box kind of folks, and we will design something specifically for your needs. The other way to get in touch with us is to call our office, and that number is 919-787-1579. So that, again, that's 919-787-1579.
Barbara, how far you are willing to travel to assist organizations? Are you all traveling worldwide, locally? Just how broad are you trying to take your platform?
Oh, I have no limitations. I mean, personally, I don't. Some of my associates have jobs and other responsibilities. This is my, I don't know, maybe my 5th career. So, I'm supposed to be retired and kick back and relaxed, but I just felt this calling, and I still feel really good about it. And so, it depends. I mean, we'll go out of state, and go out of the country. I mean, we'll have to have our travel taken care of, but I'll go anywhere if I can help people. Put it.
Well, Barbara, we are out of time, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing that. So we're going to definitely have to have you back on, because I do want to hear about your trip in Egypt that you just came from, Cairo. And like you said,
and Paris, too, don't forget.
And Paris. So I definitely want to have you back. I appreciate you coming on today, sharing that. And, of course, myself and Michael will be a part of that platform. So I just want to thank you for coming on today, and thank the audience for tuning in. I appreciate you all. Again, we're now Lifelong Learners talk show. We're no longer Rebels with a Purpose. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to having to being on again with you all next Tuesday at 2. Thanks, and have a blessed week.
Great show.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.